Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be back with you. I've got Daniel Shai with me today, and Daniel has just recently graduated from the certification program to be an insomnia recovery coach. And I had the great honor and privilege of working with him in the program and just wanted to bring him into this conversation so we can just get so much wisdom from him today. Thanks so much for being here and joining me, agreeing to do this with me, Daniel.
Oh, thank you so much, Aly. I'm really happy to be here and to have this discussion with you. I think it's going to benefit people. And I just want to say I've already told you, but it's been so great being with you and working with you in the immunity program. And yeah.
Oh, I've loved it so much. So before we dive in, do you want to just give folks just a little bit of your own background? Because I know that you've gone through insomnia and chronic fatigue recovery, and this was like a 30-year journey for you. So if you want to just give people just a little background, just so they know who you are, would that be okay?
Sure, yeah.
Awesome.
So in brief, yeah, my journey started in childhood, basically. And so, as it goes, it started with a sleepless night and a lot of fatigue the next day. And my anxiety was both, about not sleeping in order to avoid that terrible fatigue. So really the chronic fatigue was very central for most of the time. I was anxious about sleep because I was anxious about the fatigue. I was trying to avoid the fatigue. So I wanted to secure sleep, and I put all that pressure into sleeping. And what happened was that the sleep was never refreshing for me. And, fast forward, 2 decades later, and I'm still in the struggle, not understanding the way out yet. But my insomnia started getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I became dependent on whatever I could get my hands on, edibles, pills, just to get some sleep. Eventually those stopped working, of course. And it was very scary. That's when it really spiraled into really not sleeping, into intense fear. And again, long story short, I finally came across Daniel's channel and I really began to recover. And eventually my heart was so this into this amazing recovery process. And I think in this video we're going to show some amazing lessons that you get from the recovery and why it's so amazing. And I really wanted to share that with people, and so that was a big reason why I joined the certification program. And here I am today. And so my attention is both on helping people with insomnia recovery and chronic fatigue recovery, because in my case they were totally linked.
Yeah. And I actually see that a lot in my own practice is that, that those like can coexist quite often. So I think it's so wonderful to have your powerful voice in this recovery space. You're going to help so many people. I feel really grateful to know you and get to work with you. So just thanks for
Same.
being here.
Thank you, Aly.
So, yeah, as Daniel alluded to, today we are going to be talking about the biggest lessons of the insomnia recovery journey. And these are, from our perspective and what we've gone through and what we also see occur for so many people when they go through this recovery process. And both Daniel and myself are spiritual people. And so it was really amazing to come out of this with some of these ahas, these spiritual evolutions that I don't know I could have gained any other way, even though this was the hardest experience of my life. In some ways it was also the most transformative. So we'll just jump right in. We've kind of outlined this a little bit so we can have a flow here. And the first thing we want to talk about today is the first lesson that we both feel that we've kind of gained from this experience, and that is letting go of what is beyond our control, allowing what is to be present and to exist without resisting it. What are your first kind of thoughts as we talk about this first point?
I mean, this is the one of the main things is that what maintains the struggle, and really is kind of like a central mechanism of suffering itself, is the desire to avoid what is when it's uncomfortable and unpleasant. And, this is very much the situation with fatigue, the debilitating fatigue that you feel with chronic fatigue. You so don't want to feel it. You want to avoid it at all costs. So just like with sleeplessness in the case of insomnia, you make any and all efforts to avoid it. And maybe you're trying to rest all the time, or you're whatever it is that you do, but you definitely don't want to feel that. And actually the very avoidance of it sustains it.
Yeah.
And it's the same with, sleeplessness, that we don't want to accept the wakefulness, and we don't want to accept the maybe anxiety or fear or discomfort that we may feel either during the night or the next day. And so again, the very rejection of what is sustains it. So through the process of recovery, you learn to soften that up, and you learn that trying to control the outcome so that it isn't painful and is pleasurable. We're trying to cling to pleasure and avoid pain here, is actually not serving you. Whereas acceptance does serve you. And as you always say, and I think it's such a powerful way to word things, and it's so true and clear, that acceptance signals safety to the nervous system, whereas that avoidance tells us that there's danger. We need to avoid this. And so it stays stuck in struggle.
Exactly. Oh gosh, so well said. So well said. What comes to mind for me is that, it's out there. We've heard it everywhere. Resistance. Help me with this. It's
what you resist persists.
What we resist persists. Yes.
Yeah.
What we resist persists. I've heard that all my life. That's just like this, almost a spiritual adage, right? That you just hear out there. It's like, what you resist persists. Can't tell you how many times I heard this, and I really didn't understand what it meant. I thought it sounded cool. But until I went through this insomnia journey, I really didn't know on a practical level what that meant. And now I certainly do, and the same is true for this concept of letting go or letting be. It was all theoretical. And as a yoga teacher, and I know for you as a spiritual teacher, these concepts are something that we teach about all the time, and we have a very good understanding of them in theory, and it looks very different in practice.
Yeah.
And this is where my journey kind of really taught me, because all of these concepts were very familiar to me and I understood them, but I couldn't figure out how to make them apply to where I was at in my struggle.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So this idea of what we resist persists is exactly what you were saying with, it's literally how the brain works, right? When we avoid something, we are letting the brain know that that thing is dangerous. And so it's the brain's job to protect us from that thing. And the threat detection system that exists within all of us, that fight or flight response, it's uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable by design. So our body's just doing what it's meant to do because we've told it, we got to avoid that. That's dangerous. Okay, I'll protect you from that. Cue more discomfort because that state is uncomfortable by design, right? And now we have this internal struggle. We're fighting the very mechanism in ourselves that is trying to protect us, right?
Exactly.
And so what I didn't realize is that resistance in me, like, oh my gosh, not that I just don't want to experience that wakefulness or anxiety or whatever it is, was the thing that was perpetuating my struggle. Like you said, exactly. The avoidance, right?
Yeah.
So it became very clear to me. And by the way, it was really a challenging proposition for me to be like, okay, so I have to jump into this, right? All of this discomfort. It's like the concept that we teach about befriending wakefulness. I've shared this before, but I remember coming to this program and going, I'll do whatever it takes. I'm going to be the A+ student here. I am the go gangbusters. Here we go. I'm ready. Let's recover. And the first thing I hear is, and now we're going to befriend wakefulness. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me,
It's like, no, just not that.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
anything but that. That's the one thing, that I'm trying to avoid, the discomfort I'm trying to avoid. And it turns out that's the very thing that's perpetuating
Yeah.
this loop in
Yeah.
my brain, right? Detecting it as dangerous. So understanding that came first,
Mhm.
that it wasn't dangerous, right? That my brain had this misunderstanding. It was misperceiving this as a danger. But then the actual work, the experience of being more tolerant of the experience of wakefulness, right? And it happens gradually. And I think that's a really key point to let people in on too, because none of these spiritual lessons that we're going to talk about today, came overnight. It
No.
was quite a journey, right? Quite a
Letting
journey.
go is a journey. It's not a moment. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah,
think, like, even like we said on today's call, it's not a one and done, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
it's
like
a
we wave, so sometimes we're more in the let go energy. It seems more accessible to us. Sometimes resistance is hard to let go of. But those are the moments where sometimes, not resisting the resistance can be helpful, or, you know, accepting that we can't accept, you
Mhm.
know, anything that softens or takes the pressure off is in the
Totally.
direction of letting go.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. And I would even add to that, whatever is more kind, right?
Oh, yes, yes.
Because exactly like you said, like that's going to be what signals the safety. If
Yeah,
I'm having a fight within myself, even if it's about, I need to accept this, I know that's what I need to do to, get better. And so we're efforting acceptance. And
exactly.
unfortunately, that's just not how it works. It's an internal state, not something we can manufacture. And I always like to tell people too, there is nothing you need to be, do, or have for this process to unfold. All paths out of the struggle lead this to the same, to acceptance, right? Accepting
Yeah,
reality on
yeah,
reality's terms,
yeah,
right? And this is it's an organic process, and really we just kind of have to get out of our own way.
exactly.
um but yeah, I love talking about it with you because we are so on the same page with it, so it just
Oh,
is so
absolutely.
much
And
fun.
it's gonna connect, beautifully to the other points, because really, throughout the journey, um, it's all connected. The lessons are connected. Like you mentioned, kindness and the letting go, and it's gonna connect
Yeah,
to the other points we're gonna talk about as well, like letting go of attachments, and so attachment to outcome, I mean. Yeah, but this is
yeah,
I think just one last thing about that first point is that I've noticed this also within the program. The more students are progressing, they begin to suspect that the idea that control protects me, like having more control, actually might not be true.
right,
That there
right.
is oddly, and this might not make sense at first to the mind, but there's a safety in letting go, because it's really a safety in acceptance. So just to strengthen the point of what you said, all paths lead to acceptance, which means they lead to safety and away from threats.
Absolutely. So well said. Thank you for making that point. And as you were saying, point number two does lead very nicely from our point number one, and they are very interconnected. But number two, releasing attachments to outcomes, trusting that I'll be okay, whatever the outcome, and this idea that the only way out is through. And oh my goodness, is
Mhm.
that really a point to bring in today? Because we've kind of mentioned it even before we started our call, and it goes back to understanding these ideas theoretically, but not kind of being
Exactly.
willing to go through the experience.
That's the key word there, the willingness. And I, just like you shared earlier about, you knew these concepts. I didn't mention in my background, but you actually did mention it, that I am a spiritual teacher. And, so and I've been studying spirituality, everything from Buddhism to Kabbalah and everything in between, like very deeply. And I obviously knew all of these concepts, especially from Buddhism. And but until you have something tangible to practice it on, that is really a challenge to you. Like both chronic fatigue and insomnia, the fatigue, you just feel like there's no way I can. This is what Daniel calls the acceptability threshold.
Yeah.
I can accept up to this. This is a level of discomfort that is a no. And same thing with insomnia. Like, I can accept wakefulness one night, but 2 nights you're pushing it,
Yeah.
and so, but again, like we said, the willingness,
Yes. Yeah.
because the resistance, the avoidance energy is the struggle. The willingness opens that up. And the willingness is exactly the releasing of the attachment to outcomes, because it's basically saying, and we don't want to hear this when we have insomnia. This is the very thing we're trying to resist. But I may sleep tonight. I may not sleep. I may sleep some. I don't really know. My predictions are probably going to be wrong anyway. I don't really know, but can I find that softer place within me that says either outcome is going to be okay?
Yeah.
And I just want to say, within that, I think learning that discomfort is, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's not the end of the world, and learning to separate between discomfort and danger. So every time we feel discomfort and we judge it as wrong and we want to avoid it, like I said earlier, we're telling the brain, and you kind of also, strengthen this idea that we're really teaching the system that discomfort is dangerous. As we decouple that, so maybe I'll feel a bit of discomfort, but where discomfort really becomes suffering is that internal and mental emotional struggle against it.
Yeah.
And in the chronic fatigue world, and I think also people with insomnia know that the tiredness of the next day is very different if you were in battle mode and if you were not. If you're in resistance and in against, and in absence of willingness, and this in the judgment of what's happening as wrong, it's not just what's happening. We think that what's happening is the issue, but so much of it largely is really how we think about what's happening.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I could listen to you all day describe it, because I really, really feel the exact same way about it. And it is that whole idea that nothing is ever good or bad, but it's our thinking that makes it so, right?
Shakespeare.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Knew you'd knew it. I knew you'd know that reference. But it is something that I talk about a lot in my coaching practice too, because it's so much about perspective. It's so much about the energy and attention we're giving it and labeling it as bad or wrong or, unacceptable. That is the fight, that is the struggle, right? And so once we can recognize that and see that, then we have this opportunity to respond differently. And so it does take some awareness, right? Where we have to see the way we've been responding has just been confirming danger, right? It's been reinforcing the fear. So now that I understand that, now I have this really amazing opportunity to teach my brain a new way. And that's really, like we talked about today, why recovery is possible, because my brain is constantly learning new information and making new neural connections, right? And I just think that's so amazing. And
It is.
Yeah. But you're right. Go ahead.
Well, just what you said there, to strengthen that point about responding differently, that's the only way. We're saying here the only way out is through. It means we can't avoid what might happen. We can't control the outcome. So we release attachment to the idea that, to the outcome, and to the idea that we can control it. But where our only control lies is not in controlling the flow of life itself, but in our response to it.
Yes.
Right. And not if I'm going to sleep tonight or not, because I can't control that. And the more I put pressure on it, the less likely I am to sleep, really. So, the response is what interrupts the loop, the change in response. So the
Yes,
moment we say, you know what, let's change the avoidance to allowance, with all the education that, Daniel provides and the coaches provide so generously about, realizing the difference between, again, something that is unpreferred and uncomfortable, but it's a perceived threat, yet we're not in actual danger, right? So I keep repeating that
exactly.
point because I feel it's so pivotal to
Oh,
this.
it is. It is. And once we at least understand that cognitively, it allows us to respond differently, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
we see, oh, this is what's happening. Oh, my brain is understanding that there's a threat where there isn't one. Okay. Well,
The
now
concept.
that gives, yeah, it allows me to disarm and go,
Exactly.
oh, okay. Right? Because when you're in it and you don't know what's happening, it really does feel like an emergency. It feels,
Absolutely.
yeah. So this understanding is so important to be able to have that awareness that now I do have a choice in how I respond. This isn't dangerous, right?
Exactly.
And the only way out is through concept. That was another kind of one of these lovely things that people throw around and like, what the hell does that mean? And so I want to just clarify a little bit what that means. And we've talked about it a lot, but really this is that experiential learning that has to take place because that's how our brain gathers the new data, right? We have to give it the evidence that we are more capable than it's telling us, right? Because it's like danger, 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 but there isn't an actual threat. So the moving through it is okay, discomfort is here, but it isn't dangerous. So I'm going to have the experience of meeting that discomfort and moving through it and doing what I want to do anyway. And
Yeah.
that's the experiential learning that has to take
Yeah.
place and the moving through it that we're talking about. Because when we come out on the other side of that, that is when we're going to go, oh, well, I was perfectly safe. Everything was fine. Our brain wants to catastrophize and tell us all these bad things are going to happen. And, da, da, da. And of course, that isn't true. Our brain, when it is in this state of a threatened state, it's just not an accurate narrator of reality at all, right? So, yeah, we're obviously on the same page with all of this,
You
but
know, this is such a beautiful thing to see in the insomnia recovery journey, how people just have these magical moments, right? When they discover, like, oh, I hardly slept last night, but you know what? I could totally do everything today. And either it wasn't so bad. And sometimes they don't even say it wasn't so bad. Sometimes they say, I had fun. I had a
yeah,
great
had a
time.
good day. Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
so, not that we're saying to attach to that, but it shows the system that, like, what we were taught to believe is a belief. Indeed.
exactly, exactly.
And one
Yep.
more thing I wanted to add about the only way out is through, because we're calling this the spiritual lesson. So kind of like for spiritual people like you and me, I know you did this for sure. I did this to try to say, well, insomnia isn't going to get me because I got spiritual tricks up my sleeve. I'm going to meditate my way out. I'm going to, I don't know, whatever kind of spiritual technique, or I'm going to, attached to the
Float
closet,
above it.
float above it all, basically. But
Yeah, yeah.
what I say is that insomnia teaches embodiment. Like, you are going to learn to connect your spirituality. If it wasn't connected to the nervous system before, you're going to connect it to now, and you're going to realize that you live your spirituality through enhancing the capacity of the nervous system. It has to be lived. It can't be
100%.
conceptual anymore. And so in that sense, insomnia, as terrifying and as difficult as it is, when you begin the recovery, it becomes your Zen master of,
Oh,
you will embody
so nice.
this, or don't sleep.
Yeah, no, you
Yeah.
couldn't have said it better myself. And the way I describe that, which is of course very similar, is that nothing can bypass the inner work, right? That nothing can bypass the moving through. the meeting the discomfort, the meeting the fear, the understanding that this is not the enemy, right? And
Yes.
being the spirit, having the spiritual background as well, when I learned about the nervous system, I remember being so excited because it was actually the science that matched the spirituality, right? And I was like, they're saying the same thing, but now we actually have this science to back up all these spiritual concepts that I've been teaching and so excited about for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't agree with what you're saying more. It is, well, and we are here to tell you that for us, it was one of the biggest spiritual teachers of our lives. So, yeah,
Absolutely. Yes.
absolutely. And of course, this was a big one for both of us. Self-acceptance and self-kindness.
You-
I really think that this deserved a category all on its own because so many of us that tend to develop these inner struggles or chronic conditions tend to be really hard on ourselves, hold ourselves to very high standards, have very high expectations of ourselves,
yeah.
and we sort of beat ourselves up. We're very critical of ourselves, and this is why this concept of self-acceptance and self-kindness are so incredibly healing,
Yeah.
because they signal safety to this nervous system that has learned to protect itself against us, because we are the ones being the critic, right? The harsh critic. So speak to this in, the way you so beautifully do and what this brings up for you.
It's, when I first heard Daniel speak about this in the recovery process, I was like, yeah, that's a small thing. That's like insignificant.
Yeah.
Um,
Woo woo.
boy, boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I
Mhm.
wrong. It's also, and this is also true for chronic fatigue, by the way, that the self-acceptance, self-kindness, as we go, self-kindness as we go through the process, you know, for example, it can apply to, like, say, a night where we, didn't sleep, and then we kind of go to the idea that we failed somehow,
Yeah.
and we take the whip out a little bit, and, like, we're doing it wrong, or we're wrong, or something's wrong with me. All
We
of that,
fail.
yeah, the failure, all of that, it's such a emotional and mental weight. And
Yeah.
these are the battles, is part, at least part of it, are the battles that end up as symptoms, as battle scars. It's so, again, if you move through the process with all this self-criticism, self-judgment, in a way, another word for that is self-shaming
Yeah.
and guilt. And those are really powerful emotions in terms of hurting us. Not just, it's mental and emotional, but there are literal physical symptoms.
Yeah.
And you realize that when you have a night where, let's say, you go through that and your narrative isn't so self-defeating, and so, or in the next day you're not considering that you failed a test because you didn't sleep, um, suddenly the symptoms aren't there, and there's a real learning there. It's not a concept you read in a book. You really see the difference in your body and how
Yeah.
you feel. So just to really, about self-kindness specifically, say, like, it can literally be the difference between an experience of suffering and an experience of, yeah, maybe I didn't sleep, but I'm okay. And I'm just taking a sleepless night as one thing to apply it to, but within the journey, there are, all kinds of things. It can be around pills, and, I mean, medication. It can be, there's several things to apply it to. But then, this is why, with chronic fatigue, even though there is, in the medical world, they think the cause of it is a mystery, and they don't really understand it and the solution and everything. And largely this is true with insomnia as well. There are a few therapists here and there that are clued into the fact that shame or self-criticism and self-judgment play a tremendous role.
Yeah.
And I also think this is true for insomnia. It's not immediately obvious. When I started recovering from both, this was not immediately obvious to me at all. But then I realized exactly what you were saying before about how hard we are on ourselves, the pressure
Mhm.
that we put on ourselves to
Yep.
perform, to get it right, to be perfect, to get perfect results, to, oh my Lord. And
Yeah.
so getting really honest about like, what is this costing me?
Yep.
And
Yep.
it costs a lot. I mean, it costs insomnia, it costs
Yeah.
fatigue, it costs
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I, like you, had a similar kind of experience with this when I first, saw this teaching, like self-kindness. Well, yeah, of course, I'm kind to myself. I don't know what you mean.
Right.
And I just kind of blew it off, and thought, well, yeah, duh, I'm nice to myself. And come to find out, I was so not nice to myself. I was the drill sergeant, in my own brain, cracking the whip, do better, be better, don't be scared. What's wrong with you? Blah, blah, blah. And what I know for sure, as someone that's gone through this journey, and what I have seen working with others and teaching others, is that a nervous system can't heal under harsh criticism.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to stay vigilant, and it is going to stay alert, because it has learned that it has to protect itself. And so often that is it protecting itself from us. And when I saw that, and I really, really saw that, for me, how this showed up was like the perfectionism tendencies, of course, and how the perfection tendencies showed up for me was the standards by which I was holding myself to, which nobody could live up to, right?
Mm.
And then, of course, I beat myself up if I didn't live up to my standards, my expectations. It kept me in this perpetual struggle, right? And it was fuel, like the perfectionism was like fueling this struggle, of course, because it was just keeping my nervous system heightened state, right? And when I did finally see this, oh, I felt so much tenderness and compassion for this part of myself. That was I visualized it as this part of my nervous system, as like just a little kid, like huddled in the corner. And then there was me, like with this whip, like, do better, be better, right?
Ouch.
And I was just like, it made me really cry. And I was like, I am so
Wow.
sorry.
Wow.
I just want to nurture that part of myself that I have been so hard on. I have been so mean, and I
Wow.
wasn't doing it intentionally, right?
No.
But I just kind of picked this part of myself up, and just like held this part of myself. I was like, I've got you.
Wow.
I am not going to treat you that way anymore, and I'm so
Wow.
sorry.
That is profound.
It
Yeah.
was a really profound moment, and that nurturing kind of instinct, it really grew.
Yeah.
And it created this softness within
Mm-hmm.
me, that this concept of self-acceptance and self-kindness, I was like, oh, it's not just important, it's the whole thing.
Exactly.
It's the whole
Amazing.
thing.
Yes.
And I've had this conversation with, Daniel, our founder, and I've shared this before in other videos, worth sharing again. And that is the pillars of our program: education, courage, and self-kindness. And I remember Daniel saying, if somebody was going to choose one of those three, it would be self-kindness every day. And I, even at the time, I hadn't had this experience. So I just was like, whatever, I didn't know that yet, but boy, do I now.
Yeah.
Because it was the last thing in my journey, kind of the piece that was missing, and it was the most profound and life-changing. So I can't overemphasize it. Obviously, I think I've done that, but
thank you for sharing that. I mean, yeah, I think that really speaks to me as well. For me, it came through the chronic fatigue recovery, but I had these insights and understandings happening regarding my childhood, and no blame to anybody. We're just, we're in a very judging society, self-judging, and we judge ourselves and we project judgments outwards. And I just realized that so much of it was just this internalized non-acceptance, not because I was wrong or something was wrong with me, but that was just the conditioning. That was the environment. And nobody did it on purpose. It was with their conditioning as well. It just passes
100%.
on, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But
It's
we're
so
not at
true.
fault, the moment somebody can get that, begin to realize, wow, like, I'm there, I am not wrong. I'm not wrong for being me. It's
Yeah,
incredibly profound. It's very
it
deep
really
and
is.
powerful healing. Yeah.
Such it that's the word. It's profoundly healing. And that's why this concept of self-acceptance and meeting ourselves where we are, and accepting ourselves when we are struggling and we are having a hard moment. And
Right.
it's really easy to accept ourselves when everything's going our way, or
Right.
when but it's hard to accept ourselves when we're really having a hard time, or emotions are showing up that we don't like. That's when the self-acceptance is the work. That is what is going to transform things. Is this is allowed to, this is
Yeah.
okay too,
Yeah.
this can be here too, right? And it just is amazing how, when we kind of make friends with all of these things that we have made the enemy, how that just completely turns down the volume of those alarm bells and the
Incredible.
hyperarousal and all of that, right? So
Yeah. That's
anyway,
the wisdom of befriending, right? Befriending
absolutely.
wakefulness, befriending fatigue, even through,
Yep.
by understanding that, again, it's not a real danger or threat, but there's no real harm happening. That's
Yeah.
so key to all of this.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad we talked about this. It's so important. And
Yeah.
as you know,
Yeah.
this is what the reason why I also harped a lot while I was in the program and getting my coaching certification, about the performance anxiety. I just want to,
Yeah.
squeeze that in here, because, again, like, I feel like the more self-acceptance flowered in me, the less pressure there was to perform, because you know what? I
Yeah.
can't be perfect. It's not that
Yeah.
even if I want to, I can't. I cannot. I don't know what that is, to be honest, at the end of the day. But
Right.
whatever standards it is that I'm holding, that no one can live up to them.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and so sometimes I'll perform better, sometimes I won't. But what I always say is, like, the choice to accept myself
Yeah.
remains available to me either way. And that's where I can either
Absolutely.
choose, the whip or the kindness. Kindness
Yes,
is not a whip. Kindness is soft, and the whip
it
is
is.
hard and unnecessary, really.
Unnecessary. Yes. Unhelpful and unnecessary. Yes. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. So the fourth concept that we want to discuss today is this idea of capacity. And
Yeah.
this is something that happens as we go through a recovery journey, which really boils down to us understanding that we're far more capable than we believe ourselves to be. And capacity is something that it actually, again, doesn't happen overnight. We build capacity slowly with kind of one experiential learning after another, right? This is the going through. And this is the way we build capacity, that moving through that thing that we don't think that we can do because fear and anxiety are present. But when we decide that they actually are friends and not enemies, right? And we can bring them along, be like, okay, you're coming with me. We're doing this thing because I want to live my life. It's important to me. And you're allowed to come along. And here we go. We're going to do this thing. And then we move through the thing. And this is what starts to build that capacity, because I did whatever I wanted to do, what was important to me, what I valued, with the anxiety there, with the fear there. And because I was allowing them to be, those alarm bells started to come down, because I was no longer resisting them, right? I was
Right.
no longer saying, you can't be here, you're bad, you're wrong, judging it. And so the whole experience changes. The brain's learning new information, and my capacity is widening through all of this as well. So I just think this is such an important one.
That's exactly it. The learning is experiential. And maybe I can ask you actually to expand a little bit more about something that you're so good at talking about, which is the balance between courage, like the go do it, and self-kindness, which we just spoke about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I always tell people like nobody can find that balance for you, right? This is also experiential. And because we all have our own, we're all in our own nervous system and our own body, and we really get very good at gauging what's going on in our nervous system when we go through something like this. And I also think that is a huge gift that I wish people would teach when, kids are little. They actually are starting to now. My sister's an elementary school teacher, and they are teaching about nervous system regulation now, which
Oh,
I'm thrilled
awesome.
about. I know. I'm like, gosh, I
Yeah.
wish I would have known this, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the courage and the self-kindness concept is I think of courage, and we kind of talked about it today a little bit on the call, but we've talked about it here as well. I think of courage is that willingness, right? It's that willingness to meet the moment, to meet the discomfort, understanding this isn't dangerous. It isn't going to hurt me. And I can meet it. And then that's how I can show my brain a new way. Right. So I often think of that courage as this willingness to show up for ourselves. And then the kindness that is, of course, when we know we are at kind of a limit within ourselves. And this has to do with capacity, because we gain capacity slowly. And during this recovery process, this journey, the capacity is going to kind of go up and down like a volume knob, right? Kind of like hyperarousal does. It kind of goes up and down.
Right.
And some days we're going to have more capacity to handle what is, to be with what is, and other days it's not going to feel like we have a lot of capacity. That's normal. That's a normal way of we move through this recovery process. And what I think is super important is recognizing when we are lower capacity and honoring where we're at. And that's the self-kindness piece, right?
Yeah.
Because it's misunderstood, I think, this concept, and probably because we tend to get this culturally, but push through, fight on, grin and bear it. It's like this energy of, white knuckling your way through, which is actually does not signal safety to the brain. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. It's like, oh, okay, I got to stay on high alert here. I got to be vigilant, right? And so understanding where we are within our system is so valuable, because then we can go, yeah, I don't have it in me today, and that's okay. I can honor where I'm at right now and take care of myself, right? And that's a beautiful thing. And that is actually going to be what increases my capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true that, a real, kind of Zen wisdom takeaway from this whole thing. And Daniel does talk about this is that fighting isn't the way. Fighting maintains the struggle. What we're looking for is not, with insomnia recovering, is not even sleep. We're about the end of the struggle, right?
Yep.
And so when you push through a day, and when you push yourself, and again, it goes back to the opposite of self-kindness. It's kind of this like being against ourselves, being in conflict, being self-criticism. That is a battle, and it will develop battle scars, meaning the symptoms that come with that, of hyperarousal, of a system that's in a fight or flight mode and that is constantly exhausting itself with this fight. And what we're looking for is the opposite of all of this pressure. We're looking for rest. And rest comes from non-fighting. Ease, acceptance, peace, safety. Those are all the same family, very similar. All of those. And that's, oddly, that's, we think that, developing capacity is something that we have to, somebody might think of it as another mountain to conquer, because that's how we think of getting anywhere,
right?
Social conditioning.
It's just so in our mentality, right?
Yeah, it's pressure and hard work and fighting, and it's all that. That's kind of the basic mode of society is striving, but it's the opposite here, and that's kind of why, as tough as insomnia is, there's so much, like, in a way, I mean, beauty is maybe too much of a word to say here, but there's so much gratitude in me for this kind of being forced to learn a lesson of, like, whatever you reject, you're making it into an opponent. And
Yeah.
this is what Daniel says. He says that there isn't an opponent. There's no opponent. And,
Exactly.
and this is like one of the most mind-blowing things for me that were in my journey was like, hearing it intellectually is one thing. Okay, there's no opponent. It didn't register or whatever. But coming to that aha moment, it was an aha moment for me. It was like, I am only fighting aspects of myself. I'm only fighting what is. And, if you come from the Buddhist angle, or a non-duality angle or something like that, that what is it's just an arising. Like I don't make the next word or the next thought arise, and things are more like of a happening, they arise. And so in a way, really, your only choice, your only control, your only possibility is really either reject or accept it.
Yep.
And rejection is leading into the war, and you're
Yep.
going to feel the battle scars
That's
from
the
the war.
resistance. Yep.
That's the resistance and the avoidance, and I don't want this. I think it should be like this. The attachment to outcomes. It's like it summarizes all of the things we've been talking about. And this is what teaches you, like when you see that this doesn't work, all the control, the attachment, the non-allowing, and the resistance, it doesn't work. Acceptance starts to strengthen in you, not as a mental concept, but as like a real thing that is worth doing, for lack of a better term, applying a way of responding to what is and to yourself with acceptance and self-acceptance. And gosh, how much peace that brings, because it does bring safety.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
so well said. So well said. Well,
Easier said than done, but going
I
through
know,
it,
I know, I
is
know.
how we learn it. Yeah.
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 But, I think it's just so beautiful to have this kind of a conversation because, obviously we have gone through, the way out is through, and we are on the other side of it. And I also do believe that so many of these spiritual concepts that we discussed today are a lifelong practice, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so when we talk about recovery, people think, there's this end point in the journey. And it isn't really so much that. It's an understanding and it's an awareness that we get to take with us for the rest of our lives. And these bigger spiritual concepts that we discussed today, the letting go of what we can't control, the releasing attachments to outcomes, the self-acceptance and self-kindness and the capacity, these are lifetime progressions. We get a lifetime to practice this because they are not fixed. They are mutable, right?
Yes.
And I think it's important to say that because this is an ongoing journey, right? Life is an ongoing journey. We don't cease to stop understanding ourselves or learning or evolving, right? And so taking everything that we've gained and learned from this journey, it has such bigger application
Oh my
into our
gosh.
entire lives.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Absolutely. It really does. And, I would say that the person who goes into the insomnia recovery journey is not the person who comes out. And this is also a sign, by the way, of increasing capacity is, suddenly you see more opportunities, you're willing to do more. And, but, that's just one of the signs that we spoke about, the increasing capacity. But you might even get people around you telling you like, you're a different person, because you're kinder to yourself. It's not just the capacity, it's all the things that we said. You're kinder, you're more easygoing in a way. You're not like latching onto things as much
Totally.
because you're you're natto. And like you're saying, you're natto to life much more.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you. This isn't something that you have. I mean, it's a reward, if you could say, from all the recovery journey, but it's not something that you have and that's it. It's something that I think that that this is real spiritual path. It's not an end point. I've reached enlightenment, I'm done.
Right.
It's a continuous attitude towards life and towards yourself, and which are ultimately, if we really go meta with it all, yourself, others, and life are all one thing.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And we talk about NADO, of course, in this space, which is non-attachment to outcome. I jokingly and often refer to it as LADO, less attached to outcomes, because we're human, and it doesn't have to be perfect. We can learn to be less attached while still maintaining our humanness. I think
We're
allowing
going to have preferences, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And we get to allow ourselves to be human. I think that's such a big part of this. And I was thinking about
Oh my
that
God.
when we were talking about some stuff earlier. It's like how I was so hard on myself and held myself to this standard and this expectation, right? It was like, and a friend of mine or a therapist friend, somebody said this to me, like, Aly, you've got to let yourself be human. You are human. Allow yourself to be human. I was like, oh, like it hit me, like having somebody else kind of say that. I was like, oh,
Wow.
okay. And so I started to see how these ways that I was like holding on to these perfectionist tendencies and these, they just weren't serving me, and they were actually keeping me from allowing myself to just be a human being. So,
Gosh. I think
yeah,
I'm so glad you brought that up as a cherry on the cake here, because I mean, I did that so much of my journey. It's like my spirituality was, I'm oversimplifying, but in some way it was just escaping my humanity,
yeah, yeah,
and at the end of the day, and I mean, gosh, does Insomnia teach you this, that it's really not about that, and you can't escape it, and you can't escape having preferences and caring and being human, and
yeah, yeah.
and you don't need to. That's the
No,
liberation. So you don't need to avoid anything, including being human. There's
100%.
nothing wrong with it. It's only if we try to avoid it, we're teaching ourselves that there's something wrong with it.
Yes. Yeah. And we've come full circle.
And we've come full circle, and what a amazing ride that was.
Oh, that was such a great conversation. And we just have this flow when we talk. I love it so much.
I get neck pains from nodding too much from what you say.
I know. And I get like this, I'm on perma grin, like, yes, yes. Oh my gosh. So just to let the community know, how can they find you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I have my website is restedandfree.com, and my YouTube is also at Rested and Free. So yeah, that's basically it.
Awesome.
And yeah, they might see me around collaborating with you,
Yes.
maybe, and
Yeah.
other coaches. So it'll be
Yeah.
fun.
We will, and we'll do more of these because I think we can do some series even. And as you guys know, I have my own channel, Sacred Sleep Coach. You can follow that on YouTube, and we're reprising Aly's takes, so that's going to be coming back. And you'll find this episode on the Sleep Coach channel, Sleep Coach School channel, which we are so grateful for all of Daniel's work, our founder. And I will just mention there is an episode under Aly's take about post-traumatic growth. And that is a real psychological term and a phenomenon that happens when we go through something like this. This is like kind of the science. We've been talking about the spiritual, but this is why we emerge out of something like this, a changed person, because our brain literally makes new neural connections and circuits. And this is the post-traumatic growth. So I just wanted to let you know that's also available for reference. And thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I loved our conversation so much.
Me too. I hope people benefited from this. I hope the audience benefited. And thank you so much for inviting me. And I always love talking to you, Aly.
Ditto. Well, we'll do more in the future. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening to our conversation about the biggest spiritual lessons we've learned from the insomnia recovery journey. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon.